And when we go down that rabbit hole, you see that there's a gazillion peptides out there that are partial sequences of bioidentical hormones that your body produces. Vigorous Steve here. Some of you are complaining that you can't attain your bodybuilding aspirations or fitness aspirations only using bioidentical hormones. The constraint of using bioidentical hormones for safety prevents you from reaching your goals. And to that I say, ha! You puny gym rats. There are millions, well, not millions, but a lot of bioidentical hormones to choose from. If you can't attain your fitness aspirations or at least get close to an impressive physique using only these hormones, maybe you should consider another sport, right? Or just pick up chess or just online gaming. You know, you go to Twitch, you open up an account there, and you start screaming at the screen, and hopefully people throw you some money through donations. For the rest of us that enjoy bodybuilding and fitness and like to stay as healthy as possible, constraining ourselves to bioidentical hormones or only use the ones that are available as a pharmaceutical product, right? Because the clinical data is there. Let's restrict at least off-season use to bioidentical stuff, make the most amount of gains possible during this period while staying as healthy as possible. Now, since I'm a nice guy, I always come bearing gifts. I'm going to give you an entire list of what I consider to be bioidentical hormones, albeit with a little bit funky modifications or partial sequences. Hormones which are bioidentical or can be considered bioidentical or found in nature that you can choose from, right? And then you can justify to yourself while you're running particular compounds during the off-season. And then at least you should be able to keep yourself a little bit healthier in the process. And you leave all the synthetic stuff for cutting phases or contest preps or other periods of time where you need to look phenomenal. Let's get started. Testosterone is bioidentical. Your body produces that in the testes and other parts of the body through synthesis of DHEA and pregnenolone into testosterone. You can take testosterone exogenously, although you'll shut down your hypothalamic pituitary, testes, and adrenal axis. The adrenal axis only gets downregulated, doesn't shut down completely, so you'll still produce a little bit of DHA and pregnenolone, which cascades into testosterone and estradiol and a lot of intermediary hormones as well. Testosterone is bioidentical. I like testosterone. It should be the base of all cycles. Nandrolone is also bioidentical. Your body produces trace amounts, so trace that there's no reference range in serum, so you can detect nandrolone in serum, but it's not part of a conventional blood test like testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, and all the other hormones that your body depends on. And nandrolone is produced in trace amounts in the conversion, the aromatization of testosterone into estradiol. It's predominantly present in the aromatase enzyme, but some of it disperses into the peripheral space to the point it might be detectable in serum, but again, there's no reference range for it. Nandrolone is bioidentical. Maybe 1 milligram per week is considered a bioidentical dose, and everything over that, again, considering there's no reference range, and I can't really find out how much nandrolone the body produces naturally, I would say anything over 1 milligram nandrolone per week is super physiological. Again, you can get great results from 50 milligrams nandrolone per week. Some of my clients run that as a therapeutic dose to help with a little bit of joint pain and lubricate the joints, right? And promote a little bit of water retention to make heavy, strenuous workout a little bit less invasive on the joints. And some guys like to run 1,000 milligrams of nandrolone. And well, it's a bioidentical compound. There's a lot of clinical evidence to research and make a choice on regarding risks to rewards. I would consider that to be a suitable option during the off-season, and the dose highly depends on you. Micronized progesterone, bioidentical hormone. Your body produces progesterone from pregnenolone, and when you downregulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, progesterone levels come down unless you use ACG, HMG, or another method to mimic your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Now, micronized progesterone is available as an oral sublingual product. Might be helpful to stimulate libido with intermittent use, and might also potentiate a little bit of anabolism on top of the testosterone, nandrolone, or whatever other bioidentical compound you're using in your stack. DHEA and pregnenolone are bioidentical. For the guys that don't respond well to ACG or run such a high dose of testosterone and nandrolone that ACG appears to be not effective, and you can see that by your DHEA sulfate levels declining over time. If you're smart enough to do blood work frequently, then supplemental DHEA and pregnenolone might be advised. And if you're responding well to ACG and you see that your DHEA sulfate and your pregnenolone sulfate and free DHEA levels are sustained with blood work results, then, well, you don't need supplemental DHEA and pregnenolone. I found it personally to be highly beneficial from particular dosages of exogenous testosterone plus Primo or Trenbolone or whatever else in cases where ACG seems to be insufficient, right, to raise DHEA sulfate concentrations, which have some overlapping effects regarding your overall well-being, memory formation. Right? There's a lot of benefits of DHEA and pregnenolone. Might be wise to supplement that in. They're bioidentical. It's all good in my book. And then there's Andractim DHT cream, which contains dihydrotestosterone, which is otherwise produced through 5-alpha reductase activity, converting testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. And some people use that off-labelly to grow penile tissue. Personally, I have no experience with that, but there is some anecdotal reports that Andractim DHT cream is able to increase penis length and penis girth. It's bioidentical, so there's something to say for it. I wouldn't consider it to be an anabolic, and I'm also considering that it might potentiate a lot of hair loss in places you don't want it, and a lot of hair growth in places you don't want it either. But still, it's bioidentical, so there's something to say for it in particular cases. And then there's estradiol, which can be found as oral ethinyl estradiol or injectable estradiol benzoate or valorate, which has very limited applications. I've heard people that do nandrolone-only cycles administer injectable estradiol to sustain serum estradiol concentrations and not get into the state of neurotoxicity and keep their lipid levels in range, right? All the benefits that come along with estradiol. So when you do a cycle without a testosterone base, it might be required to inject estradiol or use oral estradiol or ethinyl estradiol, which seems to metabolize into estrone quite a bit. So it might not also be that beneficial. But if your sex hormone binding globulin is crashed, then there's something to say for injectable or oral estradiol, which is able to raise sex hormone binding globulin concentrations within the bloodstream quite rapidly. So that's the only practical application of estradiol in the context of being a fitness enthusiast or a bodybuilder. Now, those are what your body produces naturally, right, in the normal functioning of the hypothalamic pituitary testes and adrenal axis. And then some of those hormones are then converted into estradiol or dihydrotestosterone further down the line in the peripheral tissue. Boldenone occurs in nature. It's not bioidentical in humans, but it occurs in nature. It's found in the scent gland of the Elebius fenestratus, which is a species of aquatic water beetle. So boldenone is bioidentical in beetle. You can use that as an excuse to run boldenone during the off season. Even though I'm not really for boldenone, I would prefer Primo. But boldenone is certainly more bioidentical, more present in nature than primobolan, which is a synthetic derivative of dihydrotestosterone. Turkesterone, an extract of the Ajuga turkestanica plant, has some anabolic properties by potentiating collagen synthesis and anabolism through the estrogen beta receptors. Not bioidentical in humans, but found in nature. Same for the ecdysteroids, which also potentiate anabolism through the estrogen beta receptors. Ecdysteroids are present in arthropods, where they regulate ecdysis, which is molting, the metamorphosis of arthropods into another state, going from the larva state to the adult state, or shedding their their exterior shell so they can grow with the next state. So the ecdysteroids help to regulate that. Again, boldenone, turkesterone, and ecdysteroids are found in nature. To say, hey, listen, they're found in nature. even though they have some anabolic properties, they're close to be as bioidentical as I want to, and you could consider to add them in or not. Personally, I would not consider them to be bioidentical in humans because, again, humans don't produce boldenone, testosterone, or ecdysteroids by themselves, but they are present in nature, so there's something to say for it. What humans do produce are thyrionine T4 and triiodothyronine T3. T4 can be used to stimulate the metabolism in a micronutrient deficient state or due to thyroid insufficiency, and T3 can be supplemented to sustain metabolism in caloric deficient states or when T4 levels have depleted. Again, thyroid stimulating hormone releases T4 from the thyroid gland, which is then converted into T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormones in the body. It helps to regulate protein, carbohydrate, and fat metabolism. So T4 is converted into T3 with the deiodinase enzymes. And when T4 levels deplete, so does T3 levels deplete because there's no T4 to convert into T3. And when T3 levels are very, very high through to exogenous use, your thyroid stimulating hormone levels go down and your T4 levels deplete also. So when you supplement with T3, there's a bridging period of T4 use, and ideally use growth hormone in conjunction to stimulate the conversion of T4 into T3 by upregulating deiodinase enzyme activity. I'll make a separate video about that in the future, but these are all things you have to consider. Both are bioidentical, but the use of T4 and T3 is a little bit different and circumstantial depending on your caloric intake and which of the other hormones you're using alongside of these thyroid medications. ACG is bioidentical in humans. Men produce ACG, human chorionic gonadotropin, in trace amounts. There is a reference range for it, but in most cases it's undetectable unless you use exogenous ACG. So when you use bioidentical testosterone and your HPTA is shut down and the other methods to sustain HPTA function and testicular function are ineffective, like Kisspeptin 10, for example, which is 100% bioidentical, or boosterelin, triptorelin, or gonadorelin, which are all sequences of gonadotropin hormone releasing hormone, but I was not able to piece together how much of a sequence or how bioidentical they are, so I'm left them off this list. For now, what's bioidentical approved? ACG, HMG, FSH, and Kisspeptin 10, albeit that Kisspeptin 10 didn't work for me. Growth hormone is bioidentical, but it's partially bioidentical because your body, your pituitary gland, produces two kinds of growth hormone with different molecular weight. One is 20 kilodaltons, and the other one, which is available as an exogenous growth hormone injection, is 22 kilodaltons. Now, your pituitary gland produces the 20 and 22 kilodalton in a 1:9 ratio. And then there's also a 23 to 24 kilodalton growth hormone, which is only present in post-exercise states. Now, because of this ratio and the fact that exogenous growth hormone is all 22 kilodaltons, you're skewing this ratio even further. But I can't say that anybody has ever experienced a negative effect from skewing the ratio between the 20 to 22 kilodalton molecular weight of growth hormone by taking exogenous growth hormone. Because again, your body might downregulate the production of this 20 kilodalton growth hormone from the pituitary, or because you're taking it exogenously, you change the ratio from 1:9 to maybe 1:18 or 1:40, right? Depends on how much exogenous growth hormone you're using. From what I've seen on the research, it doesn't appear that exogenous growth hormone reduces or diminishes the secretion of the 23 to 24 kilodalton growth hormone, which is secreted in post-exercise state. So in that sense, you're skewing the ratio a little bit, but you're not mitigating a beneficial secretion locally. So growth hormone is bioidentical, albeit with a little bit of a caveat that you're changing the ratio between the 22 kilodalton growth hormone that you're administering and all the other kilodalton molecular weight growth hormones which are present in the body. Now, HGH frag 176 to 191 technically is bioidentical because it's a partial sequence of bioidentical growth hormone, whether that's exogenous growth hormone or endogenous growth hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. So it's a very small sequence of growth hormone consisting of about 8.13% of the growth hormone molecule being the last amino acids of the growth hormone molecule itself. It's said to induce lipolysis. From personal experience, I feel that it's helpful. It's albeit not as potent as growth hormone itself, but I feel it's contributing to my fat loss journey. So you could technically say that HGH-Frag 176 to 191, also known as anti-obesity drug, is bioidentical because it's a partial sequence of growth hormone. And when we go down that rabbit hole, you see that there's a gazillion peptides out there that are partial sequences of bioidentical hormones that your body produces. Some of them are produced in higher amounts in your younger years and they kind of diminish over time. So let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit further. Sermorelin, or growth hormone releasing factor 1-29, is a partial sequence of growth hormone releasing hormone, which has 44 amino acids. And sermorelin, or GRF 1-29, are the first 29 amino acids of growth hormone releasing hormone. Sermorelin in GRF 1-29 is bioidentical, albeit a sequence of a bioidentical hormone. So you're missing the last couple of amino acids. And CJC 1295, with or without the drug affinity complex, is then a modified version of the GRF 1-29, where one or several of the amino acids are altered to alter its binding affinity and overall effect regarding growth hormone secretion. And then the drug affinity complex extends the active life of the modified GRF peptide chain. So these are, you could say, almost bioidentical. It's the same with insulin, which we'll discuss a little bit later, where they take a sequence of a bioidentical hormone or the full bioidentical hormone and manipulate particular amino acids at part of the chain or part of the molecule to shorten the active life, prolonged the active life, change the relative binding affinity to its respective receptor. So they're based on a bioidentical hormone, but with modifications, they're technically not bioidentical, but they might still act in a bioidentical fashion, albeit with different pronounced effects or different active lives. So regular insulin, for example, that's 100% bioidentical. That's the exact same amino acid peptide chain as the insulin which is produced in the beta cells of the pancreas. But that's only regular insulin. Some insulins are modified at the B chain, which shortens the onset, peak, and duration of regular insulin, or also known as short-acting insulin, and turns this regular insulin into rapid-acting insulin because they have some modifications on the B chain, fundamentally acting as an insulin, albeit in a shorter onset, peak, and duration compared to regular insulin. So it works faster. And then you have intermediate and long-acting insulin, which are modified on the A and B chain, depending on which formula you get, right? There's several different formulations and modifications available which ultimately prolong the onset, peak, or duration. And some of these formulas don't even have a peak. They just act for 24 to 48 hours without a clear peak. They just act continuously. So these insulins, based on regular insulin, have modified A or B chains, or both, which alters the active life quite substantially. Now, these alterations influence how insulins aggregate into hexamers. Hexamers are six insulin molecules that clump together. And when they're clumped together in a form of an hexamer, the insulin requires longer to be metabolized and starts to activate. So you see that with insulin glargine. Lantus, for example, has a very high likelihood to form insulin hexamers. And rapid-acting insulins prefer to stay as insulin monomers, increasing the absorption and shortening the active life. Increlex, pharmaceutical-grade IGF-1, recombinant IGF-1 that is, 100% bioidentical, impossible to source for 99.9999% of us. But for the lucky few, they have access to recombinant human insulin-like growth factor 1, probably the most potent peptide you can use regarding the accrual of muscle tissue, assuming that you have couple things in place to promote anabolism and recovery as well. Iplex is also recombinant human insulin-like growth factor 1 combined with recombinant insulin-like growth factor binding protein 3. This is the only peptide that ships frozen. Again, Increlex and Iplex are basically unobtainable for the large majority of us, but they are both bioidentical. And if you are able to source it, consider yourself lucky because gains will be aplenty, considering that you have the financial means to actually purchase these products. Now, IGF-1 LR3 and IGF-1 DES are also modified, similar to the modifications that took place on insulin or some of the growth hormone secretagogues. You could technically say they're bioidentical, albeit not completely bioidentical, because again, they're modifications to extend the active life of IGF-1. There's pegylated mechanogrowth factor, which is bioidentical. Your body produces mechanogrowth factor in post-exercise states. Now, pegylated mechanogrowth factor is bioidentical because the mechanogrowth factor sequence of this peptide is bioidentical or exactly the same as the mechanogrowth factor that your body produces. And the pegylation process doesn't alter the peptide chain. It does add a little bit of an extra sequence in the form of polyethylene glycol to help with its active life, right? Prolong the active life at which it can potentiate its effect, because mechanogrowth factor has an incredibly short active life when it's produced in post-exercise states. So you want that to be a little bit active for longer. Now, the pegylation chain metabolizes off after injection over a certain period of time, leaving the rest of the mechanogrowth factor to act at the site of the administration. GHK and GHK-copper, both are completely bioidentical. Your body produces GHK and GHK-copper by itself in smaller and smaller and smaller amounts as you age. It helps with collagen synthesis, right? It's produced all over the body, so there's not a particular organ which produces GHK and GHK-copper. And there's also Pal-GHK, which doesn't contain copper, which is also technically bioidentical because the GHK is a bioidentical hormone. But the palmitate, which is contained within Pal-GHK, it helps to make GHK more permeable through the skin. So you see that topical GHK formulas often contain Pal-GHK because it actually transports through the skin, allowing for some localized collagen synthesis at the site of administration. So let's say you have some skin issues, for example, and you require some localized collagen synthesis and you're afraid of needles and you don't want to go with GHK copper injectable because, well, the post-injection pain, legendary. So you go with Pal-GHK, you rub that on the site of where you want collagen synthesis, or you rub it in your elbow because you have a little bit of pain in your elbow and you want some localized collagen synthesis in that area. Then the Pal-GHK would permeate through the skin. Then the palmitate is metabolized from the GHK, and now the collagen synthesis and the reduction of wrinkles and improved skin firmness and all that good stuff that's associated with GHK can get into effect. So that's bioidentical after the palmitate is metabolized off, similar to how the polyethylene glycol is metabolized from the mechanogrowth factor after administrations. TB500, a partial sequence of thymosin beta, which is produced by the thymus. Unfortunately, the thymus slowly disappears with age. So the older you get, the less thymus you have, the less thymosin beta 4 your body produces, at which point you might want to supplement with TB500s intermittently to help with angiogenesis, improve connective tissue right at the site of administration, lower systemic inflammation. A lot of benefits of TB500. It's not something you use long term, just as is to recover injuries and perhaps help with a little bit of angiogenesis in that area to improve nutrient delivery afterwards. The same is the case for BPC-157, a partial sequence of body protection compounds, which is produced in the intestinal tract. Now, BPC-157 can help with wound healing and angiogenesis at the site of injection as well, similarly to TB500. And it can also help with the intestinal lining and overall quality of the intestinal tract when taken orally. TB500 and BPC157 you can consider bioidentical because they're sequences of bioidentical hormones, not modified, just a shorter, truncated part of the peptide chain that your body produces naturally. Cerebral lysine is bioidentical. Although it's derived from pig brains, the hormones which it contains are hormones that your body produces naturally. So more specifically, that's brain-derived neurotropic factor, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, nerve growth factor, and ciliary neurotropic factor. Those four are contained within cerebral lysine, and those four hormones are produced in the body, albeit not at the amount you could get from a supraphysiological amount of neurotropic factors through a cerebral lysine administration. 100% bioidentical, although they're derived from purified pig brains. Look at it in the same way as getting a urine purified HMG from the urine of pregnant woman, right? The manufacturing process might be a little bit dubious, but you'll still get the bioidentical hormones in your body. Cmax, a partial sequence of adrenocorticotropic hormone, only 4 amino acids of the 39 amino acids that adrenocorticotropic hormone contains, sequence 4 to 9 more specifically, and then a proline-glycine-proline sequence is attached to extend its active life. Now, there are several different formulations of Cmax. I would consider all of them to be partially bioidentical based on this adrenocorticotropic hormone, and C-Lank, which is very comparable to Cmax in its overall beneficial effects regarding mood, cognition, and the increase of brain-derived neurotropic factors in the brain. C-Lank is completely bioidentical to the immunomodulatory hormone tuftin, which has 4 amino acids. C-Lank has the identical 4 amino acids that tuftin contains, plus a proline, glycine, and proline attachment to prolong its active life. So both of these compounds, Cmax and C-Lank, are either a sequence or completely bioidentical to hormones which your body produces and have an overall beneficial effect regarding your bodybuilding aspirations to help with neurological fatigue or prevent neurological fatigue post-exercise. So I've been experimenting with Cmax and C-Lank. Both are considered to be bioidentical or sequences thereof, and in my opinion, highly beneficial when it comes to the protection of your brain and mitigate some of this neurological stress which occurs post-workout. Last one I want to discuss are the GLP-1 receptor agonists, which are a little bit wishy-washy because right, you have bioidentical GLP-1, and each GLP-1 receptor agonist has different formulations. So you could consider semaglutide to be the most bioidentical of the glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists available, which is 94% bioidentical, and it has 2 alterations of the amino acids of glucagon-like peptide-1, and these modifications to the amino acids also prolong the active life and prevent breakdown. Right? So semaglutide has a 7-day active life. Now, dulaglutide, which has an active life of 45 days, contains a partial sequence of glucagon-like peptide 1, which is produced in the intestinal tract in response to eating, sequence of the amino acids 7 to 27 of GLP-1, which is then linked to an Fc fragment of human IgG4, which I have no idea what that stands for. But again, linking this partial sequence of GLP-1 to a fragment prolongs its active life. And then you have liraglutide, which is simply the partial sequence of GLP-1 amino acids 7 to 27 with one modification, has a 1-day active life, right? The 24-hour active life. This is why I prefer it, so I can dose liraglutide as needed. So you would say that semaglutide is the most bioidentical of all the GLP-1 receptor agonists. But again, they're all slight modifications in a simple sense that insulin is modified to shorten or prolong its onset, peak, and duration as well. So there's a huge list, and I'm sure there's many other hormones that we can choose from, but in the context of fitness and bodybuilding and developing your physique, this is the list that would be commonly used with the restriction of bioidentical hormones, bioidentical in nature or bioidentical sequences. So let's recap real quick here at the end of this video. Hormones I would consider to be 100% bioidentical are as follows: testosterone, nandrolone, micronized progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, DHT creams, estradiol, valerate or benzoate, not ethinyl estradiol, that's slightly modified, T4, T3, ACG, FSH, HMG, kisspeptin, growth hormone, HGH frag 176191. Again, it's a partial sequence, but it's not modified. Sermorelin or GRF 1 to 29. CJC and some of the other growth hormone secretagogues are modified, so I would only consider a sequence to be bioidentical. And when it's modified, I would not consider it to be 100% truly bioidentical, albeit that it still has some practical applications here and there. And it really depends on how much of a restriction you want to put on yourself. Regular insulin, bioidentical. Increlex and Iplex, bioidentical. Pegylated MGF or pegylated MGF, bioidentical. GHK and GHK copper, as well as Pal-GHK, all bioidentical. Again, these metabolize into GHK, which is the active hormone that stimulates collagen synthesis. What is called palmitate is just an addition, same as the pegylation is an addition to the parent hormone that potentiates its effects. TB500, bioidentical. BBC157, bioidentical. Cerebrolysin, Cmax, Selank, and, well, semaglutide maybe, right? It's still modified, just most of the insulins are modified, or the IGF-1, LR3, and DES are modified. And really, it depends on how much restriction you want to put on yourself. This is a very long list of performance-enhancing drugs you can use if you want to restrict yourself to bioidentical hormones. Many of these are available as pharmaceutical grades. Some of them are maybe a little bit difficult to source because they're only available in a select few amount of countries. And, well, shipping might be an issue if it has to be frozen or if it's a peptide that's susceptible to heat changes. Right? There's a laundry list of stuff you can use if you want to stick with bioidentical stuff. And listen, if you really want to cheat the system, there's always boldenone, there's always terkesterone, there's always ecdysteroids, there's always all the other insulins and GLP-1s. And, well, when you look at the peptide scene, there's a gazillion peptides out there which are based on bioidentical hormones or partial sequences or modified. Right? There's a lot of choice out there. Right. And, well, when you look at it in this kind of context, all the other steroids are modified versions of testosterone. So where do you want to draw the line? Right. And I'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology? You can find them on my website, vigoroussteve.com/shop. Personalized advice always available through consultations. The rates are on my website as well. Follow me on Instagram at VigorSteve. Not so bioidentical biceps. I mean, there's Primobolan in this picture. GHK copper is in this picture. ACG is in this picture. Testosterone is in this picture. What else am I using? HGH frag is in this picture. Cmax is in this picture. So besides the Primobolan, I'm basically on the perfect bioidentical stack and looking pretty shabby, I would say so myself. Leave it at that, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.